Hello and welcome to TIM-DND. Today I was going to talk about um, my beliefs about disability. Wheelchairs are a big topic at the moment, I've seen on the internet, as far as player characters or NPCs are concerned, and how they would work in an adventuring career. Um, my opinion on that has been changed somewhat over the last couple of weeks, so this video has been delayed a little bit in coming out. Um, and my opinion's been changed because I've been watching the Paralympics and I've watched wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball, um, the tennis, um, all of which has shown me quite clearly that someone of an Olympic athlete build can wheel themselves around fairly freely, can right that wheelchair if they get knocked over, and can wheel themselves around freely while whacking a ball around at quite high speeds with a tennis racket. So, if that's all possible in real life, then I believe in a fantasy setting, someone in a wheelchair should be able to go around a dungeon with a sword and attack a load of people, and they should be able to wheel themselves freely for doing that. There are a few caveats I still have in my head about how that would work. And there's a few caveats I have about why you should or shouldn't allow a player to do this. And we'll discuss those in this video. So the main topic we seem to talk about with this, certainly at the moment on YouTube, I've seen a lot of videos about this topic, and they've all focused on the same thing, which is wheelchairs. I don't know if this is just because that seems to be the most visible form of disability, or because obviously the thought of difficulties with stairs or whatever in a dungeon, um, but that seems to be what the main focus of this debate is with the community at the moment. I can understand the idea that people would say dungeon crawling with a wheelchair would be very difficult. There's going to be confined spaces, there's going to be staircases, which someone in a wheelchair is going to find difficult to traverse. On the other hand, the other part of the debate is I think there's a wheelchair creation out there which basically removes all of those negatives for someone in a wheelchair and gives them a load of benefits. And if that was in existence, the question is, why would every adventure not be riding around in one of those, whether they needed to or not? Because that particular build, I believe, means that they can go up and down stairs without a problem. They can not be knocked over or prone, if I remember the rules rightly, or if they do, I think they can right themselves without any effort. They get bonuses on different bits and pieces. I think it's armor class, but I'm not 100% sure. In any case, what I heard, there was lots of benefits, no negatives. And I think if you want to play a character with a disability, or if you want to put an NPC in there with a disability, it should cause them a problem of some sort. That's not to say that they can't overcome it in some way, or that they might have better skills in other areas. But to suggest, I mean, an Olympic athlete is going to have trouble on stairs if there's nothing there provided to help them with that. This was half the issue with the Paris Olympics, is that people were concerned that there hadn't been enough adaptation to the city made for people with wheelchairs. It's a real life fact that that's an issue. That being the case, I think if you're going to say, I want a character in a wheelchair, then you need to accept the fact that there will be some problems with that. Just in the same way as if you decided you wanted to be a lawful good character a paladin who cannot lie and cannot cheat, steal, and doesn't want to kill, then you're limited by those factors. So the same is going to be the case for a wheelchair or anything else that gives you a problem in your life. This shouldn't mean that someone in a wheelchair can't go on an adventure, and it shouldn't mean that someone in a wheelchair can't do other things in that adventure. There's, you take a adventuring party in with a fighter, a wizard, and a thief. The fighter is great up front and taking all the damage. The wizard far less so, and is going to get stabbed and attacked if you put them up front leading the party. You work together to overcome the problems. In fact, the only issue I can really see, if you're worried about staircases and things, is that someone's probably going to have to help that wheelchair user down the stairs. Or potentially, I should imagine, a user could go downstairs very slowly if they were in full control of their wheelchair. And I'm speaking like a wide step and slowly dropping themselves down on that steps. I'm not a wheelchair user myself. I work in a hospital as a nurse. I've seen people with wheelchairs do quite amazing things when they're used to using them. And I should imagine if push came to shove, they could just about do that with a lot of upper bodily strength. And we are talking about adventurers here who have developed that strength in order to use that wheelchair. I would be relatively happy with that, although I would say it would take a bit more time. The issue comes from knowing that you're in a fantasy setting and potentially healing could be used to fix that issue. So with a player character who, they get resurrected and things all the time once they reach a certain level, you have to ask yourself, would they not go and have this healed? And if that's the case, then you have to ask yourself, is the disability something which can't be healed? And if that's the case, you have to ask yourself, in your world, is that the case for other things? That's a whole thing all of itself, and you need to think about that before you allow a character to be in a wheelchair in your game. Potentially, the healing is going to be scarce. It probably would be. And potentially, it would be expensive. Again, probably would be. But for a player character who is going out and gaining all this gold and gaining all this stuff, are they going to stay in that wheelchair? And is it right for that wheelchair to be easily got rid of by the player character with a bit of money and some healing? I also think you need to ask yourself, why does this player character want to have their character in a wheelchair? If they are saying that they want to experience what it's like as a disabled person, I think that raises some concerns about how that plays out at the tabletop. I would be concerned if they wanted to do that and there's a wheelchair user in my gaming group, because that can cause offence. I think it could also mean that person thinks you're not actually experience anything. I don't know. It's going to depend on the player group and your DMing style and a lot of other factors. But some of these are issues that you have to consider if you're going to allow this. I also think you have to be aware of what the other party members are going to be wanting as well out of the group, and are they going to find having to help so and so down this stairwell each time to be annoying, or every time we go to an inn we have to try and find a room on the ground floor, this sort of thing. it can be ironed out amongst your group fairly easily if you take the time to do it. I do also think that there's a moral concern that you cannot really experience that sort of thing while at a gaming table amongst your friends trying to have fun. And I would worry about that as well. Um, there's a question of should you try and experience someone else's disability in a fun setting at a gaming table when you can then put that away and walk away from it. Um, I don't know 100% where I would stand on that for a player character. Um, on the other hand, someone in a wheelchair who's part of your gaming group, if they choose to want to be in a wheelchair in as a player character, um, I don't think I would see any issue with that if that's their choice. I would tend to think that someone in a wheelchair would want to role play as someone not in a wheelchair, but I'm not going to suggest that every person in a wheelchair isn't quite happy with their life and doesn't want to represent that aspect of themselves at the gaming table. So I wouldn't want to remove that either. Um, so all of those things you have to factor in. Again, if you're going to introduce a non-player character who's in a wheelchair, you have to think to yourself as a dungeon master, why have they not had this healed, or why, or how do they get about in the world in this wheelchair? How has it been built? All of these things. You need to think about it as part of their background. The same as you would any other aspect of an NPC. Um, and that's kind of where I stand on wheelchairs. I don't think you should ever have a magic item wheelchair which removes all of the negatives of being disabled and needing a wheelchair. I think that totally removes the whole point of having it in the first place and just makes people think, oh, I'm getting benefits from actually being disabled, which I think is morally incorrect and not something I would want to present in my Dungeons and Dragons group. So we talked about wheelchairs. There's a whole host of other disabilities out there, um, visibly physical ones and non-visible disabilities as well, which no one would know until obviously it affects you. Um, do we really stop people having these sorts of disabilities in their game? Um, I see characters with walking sticks or crutches and things, and I don't think people would necessarily raise an eyebrow and say, "Oh, I don't think you can have one of those." Um, People with scarring all over their body doesn't necessarily affect the game as such, but we don't raise an eyebrow about that. Um, People with malformed arms, I suppose we might say, well, how is that going to affect your character? But I suppose a spellcaster who's been born with a deformity in their hand or something, are they going to have trouble casting a spell, or have they learnt to cast spells with that disability? So is that going to affect them? Possibly not so much. I do think that we tend to allow that sort of thing as background character information without giving it as much thought as we do with a wheelchair. Um, we certainly don't think about phobias in the same way. If a character puts down as one of their weaknesses that they've got a phobia of spiders, I think most dungeon masters would go, "Great, I know what I'm chucking at you," but they wouldn't necessarily think, "Oh, that's a real issue that I don't think I can let you have because I've got this major campaign planned where you're going to go down and combat dark elves and and Lolf. um, I think I pronounced that right. Um, so we don't say that you can't do these things. Um, if someone says that they're claustrophobic, their character's claustrophobic, I don't think we would say, "Oh, well, you're going to be going into dungeons. Are you sure this is okay?" No, we'd probably say, "Oh, you might have to make a wisdom save every now and then to overcome your claustrophobia." Um, but that gives that disability and allows it to play out in the game, and we don't think so much about it. I don't know if this is right or if it's just something that's happened or something we've learned as a possibility. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't necessarily think about the same moral problems as I just discussed with wheelchairs. I'm epileptic. I haven't ever seen anyone say, "Oh, my character is going to be epileptic" in my games. Um, but would I necessarily feel bad if one of my players wanted to play an epileptic character? I don't know if I would. Um, Although I would be wondering, how is that going to play out in the game? Is it actually going to become a thing, or is it just something that's going to sit there in the background? Uh, Difficult. I'm photosensitive epileptic, so my seizures result from flashing light, flickering light. So, would some spell effects cause that in me or in a character that was photosensitive epileptic? Interesting thought. um, all of these things are potentially disabilities that someone might want to play out. Um, on the more mental health spectrum, I suppose it is, you've got autism and learning disability or uh, ADHD or all of those sorts of things, which potentially a player character or might want to play out, or you might want to put in on one of your NPCs. All of these things you have to consider amongst your group. If you've got someone with one of those conditions, are they going to be happy to see you have playing it out for a NPC? Um, I suppose the golden rule would be for a player character, if they want to have that disability, um, if they want to have a specific disability, then do any of your other players have that disability, and are they going to be offended by that, or are they um, just are they wanting this to be the case so that someone else is showing interest and experience of that? That's your group. You have to discuss that. You have to think about that. Um, is the player wanting to have this disability because they actually have that disability? In which case, I would say you identify as quite strongly with that disability. So why not? There should be no reason why a player character who has a disability, a player who has a disability, can't bring that into their character if they choose. That's a complete choice thing, and that should be allowed, as far as I'm concerned. I think the main difficulty comes if a player character wants to have a disability of another player, in which case I think you need to consult that other player, and maybe that other player needs to inform the player who wants the disability exactly what will happen if they have that disability. Or maybe that player with the disability should be the one who decides on the effects of the disability in the game. That would be a good way of resolving it. Um, I've just thought of that on the fly. We'll see. I'll see what people think about in the comments on that one. Um, in all, it all comes down to respect. I think if you have a group of people. It's the same with all the other topics you have in Dungeons and Dragons for your playing group. It's the respect you show everyone else in that group, um, and this is part of that. It's down to a session zero. It's down to what your group allows and what your group's comfortable with, and it should be about the group as far as that's concerned. Um, as simple as that. I don't really know what else you can add. It's basic common sense that you should be respectful of other people in your gaming group. And if a disability is going to offend someone else because you're using it in a way which isn't realistic for that person who has that disability, then clearly you shouldn't be playing that disability. Um, on the other hand, if you have a disability and someone says, "Oh, I don't think you should play that disability in this group," then that's an issue for them. They shouldn't. That's discrimination against you as a person. Then, so that shouldn't be allowed either. Wow, we're getting into really deep, controversial stuff here, and I didn't want to go down this route too much, but there we go. Um, it's about respect, it's about dignity, it's about allowing people to be who they want to be without affecting the rights of someone else. And that's where I draw the line on my Dungeons and Dragons group. If they want to have a disability, they will have to explain to me why they want that disability, and B, we need to make sure it doesn't impact anyone else in the group. Simple. Is it simple? It's never simple. There we go. That's how I would say I will end this video. Please like and subscribe if you like this content. Please, if you have anything in this video which you think was offensive, I am very sorry. I didn't intend it that way. Please drop a comment in the box below, and I'll try and answer anything. And hands up if I've said anything which is majorly offensive to anyone out there. I'm speaking off the top of my head sometimes, and I'm trying to make sense of things as I go along. I'm speaking as someone who has their own issues in the background, but obviously I can't totally understand everyone's point of view who happens to be in a wheelchair or has other disabilities. And if I've used the wrong word, sometimes that's just the way my head works, and perhaps I could have had it all scripted out, and I would have just been reading per rota. It would have been a boring video, and I wouldn't have enjoyed recording it so much either. Leave a comment. I'll try and answer it if there was an offensive thing said. Please like and subscribe, as I say, and see you in the next video.